like this. I got a new mic stand and a whole microphone because I think I was doing enough of these things where I felt like I wanted to improve my audio. So let me know at any point if it's going in and out. But other than that, I'm doing well.
Yeah, I think the audio sounds really good. I think the
Awesome.
mic stand really just puts you in another
Thank you.
level. You know what I
It's,
mean?
it's really professional, right? It looks
It
like you're in a
is.
better
We mean
place.
business here in the Greene Center. And I think it's like a good thing to do. Even this is really off topic, but not really. But when students are thinking about any sort of virtual interviews, like you want to make sure you have good equipment set up and that like just for some behind the scenes for the people attending this, like Joe and I, we did some mic testing before we got on, which I think is a big part of just being prepared, especially when you are in a virtual setting. So there's a little bit of a teaching moment there too, Joe.
Agreed. And I think, and I'm just gonna give a plug for the Basic Needs Hub. So if students
Mhm.
have need for some of that technology and some of that equipment, especially if they're going to be doing a lot of things, there's resources at the university to help facilitate some of that. So I think it's really important to think about how to do that best. I know a lot of our students have such different circumstances right now about where they are and how they're navigating some of this. But I think it's critically important. And we're also reserving space in our office for students that might need some space to do maybe an interview with an employer or do a networking call. So that's live, and now that students can reserve some of that space.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm really excited that that's something that we have available for students because I think it goes to a lot of the work that the whole campus is trying to do in terms of being more accessible and just providing different and fresh opportunities for students, especially knowing that the landscape is a little different this year.
Agreed. Definitely. That's understatement, right?
Yeah, it really is. It really is. So we actually had a question coming in. How would they be able to sign up for a room for interviewing?
Oh, great. Yeah, on our website, if you go to our website about where making an appointment, there's an option to pick some slots. Right now, we have some limited options just because we want to kind of gauge where the student need is at, but it's something we might expand down the road. So where you would normally find a contact, I think it's under Contact Us today. I think you can drop the link in
Yeah.
to the chat, but students can sign up for that and find some space that they might need that, especially if they have things coming up that require a little bit of a quieter space. There's also some options within the university through ECM, through event and classroom management, where you can reserve some space for classes that you might be taking that you need some quieter space. So they have an online reservation process now that you can do that as well. So some different options through the university and in our office. Obviously, we can do that as well.
Great. Thanks, Joe.
Problem.
That was a really great first question. Okay. So I know we've kind of touched upon several different topics already, but
Hey, we're just diving right in
I
today.
know we
It's
really are
good.
diving
It's
in.
September, it's semester. We're excited like to be working, so I think it's all good.
I think it's a good representation of our inner workings of our brains right now this
Yes.
time of year. It's just like, wait, what? This topic? Nope, this topic. We're all over the place. But anyways, before we get too much further, Joe, do you mind just giving us like a 30-second little spiel about who you are and like what your
Oh, yeah.
role is?
That happy to do so. So I have two significant roles at the University of Rochester. The first is kind of where I spend the bulk of my time. It's the executive director of the Greene Center for Career Education. So we serve all of art, science, engineering students. The other role I have is to coordinate some efforts across all the schools at the University of Rochester. So we have colleagues that work in the Simon School for the MBA students, Warner School, Eastman School of Medicine and Dentistry, School of Nursing. So we kind of try to collaborate and bring some things together. So we're ensuring that all students that graduate from U of R or that going through their educational experience get support they need to make really impactful and effective career decisions for themselves. So that's what I do in a nutshell.
Great. Thanks, Joe.
No problem.
So, I was wondering if you could talk a bit about what are some different virtual engagement opportunities that are currently available and coming up this fall. I know, for example, our office, we're putting on and promoting heavily right now the Virtual Career Week, which kicks off on Thursday. Everyone go check out our website. There's tons of awesome events. But yeah, Joe, could you expand a little bit more about those opportunities?
Yeah, I think obviously we're all living in a virtual world nowadays, and I know our students are in an interesting position, right? Because I think some students have some in-person experiences in classes, and many are living on campus. So hopefully, there's opportunities to connect and engage with each other. But obviously, a lot of the work that we have to do is virtual. We can't
Mm-hmm.
have any outside guests on campus. We can't have the events we typically would have had in the past, like our Career Expo. So we're really thinking more critically about how do we segment these things throughout the fall semester and into the spring semester to really meet the needs of students, but also think more critically about any issues that might be facing certain populations of students. So
Sure.
I had meetings with the class of 2022 class council, the class of 2021 class council, and I just got out of a meeting earlier today with the International Student Council. And so I think really the key thing is, are there broad things that we can provide to all students? So some of the workshops and events we have around like virtual interviewing or building resumes or kind of navigating networking. How do we offer those and make sure people are aware of them? Then are there specific needs of different populations like seniors or juniors that might want to connect with upper class students or alumni that we can facilitate? So Danae, you've been working on our Careers in Real Life series, our Careers
Mm-hmm.
IRL series, where we're bringing people, alumni, back into the university in a virtual environment to ask them questions, kind of like fireside chats with alumni about asking about their experiences in different industry sectors. So I think we're trying a variety of approaches
Mm-hmm.
to create virtual experiences that are a little bit more engaging and interactive, conversational, as opposed to lectures. I think we're
Right.
trying to steer really clear from anything that smacks of like a PowerPoint deck. And I think the AMAs are kind of that version of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to kind of talk at people in the sense of just having a bunch of slides and information. The other thing I think it's important, and I know Danae, you're working really hard on this and all summer, and I think you'll continue this fall. What kind of resources can we do that are more self-directed? What kind of
Mm-hmm.
videos can students watch? What kinds of opportunities to consume information or participate in different technology that we offer that might allow you to do that on your timetable and at your kind of leisure? So I think it's kind of a variety of offerings
Mm-hmm.
that to offer, as well as the normal, virtual one-on-one experience of just sitting down with an advisor and just asking some questions about your individual experience and how you're navigating some of this. So I think the other plug I'll make is, if you have ideas or if you think there's issues that are facing students in any sort of way, shape, or form, don't hesitate to reach out to us to recommend those things and give us ideas or collaborate with us. I think that's the number
Mm-hmm.
one thing that we've really tried to lean into the last couple of years is working with students to develop ideas that students need. So kind of what do you do? What do you need? You telling us and us kind of helping
Mm-hmm.
to facilitate some of those activities. I think the best things we've done over the last couple of years have been either ideas from our student staff or things that we've done in collaboration with student organizations or populations on campus.
I agree. I definitely agree. So we have a question coming in about, so there's a new student here, and it's hitting to the fact that there's obviously a lot that them as a student can get involved with on campus, right? Like, we know there's so many different student organizations, there's
Yeah.
all kinds of things, and especially now that we are virtual, there's, I don't want to call it noise necessarily, but there's just a lot coming at them, right? So
Yeah.
how would you best give them advice to navigate that when they're thinking about like which organizations should they join, or like how should they navigate that? Because I think we recognize that there is kind of a lot right now.
Yeah. I think if you're new to U of R, like just kind of acclimating, I think it's perfectly fine and acceptable to kind of um, try to experience a bunch of different things to kind of see where your fit is, right? Whether it's the issue that you might be that want to dive into, maybe it's the people that are involved in solving the problem of that organization, or the kind of the environment they're trying to create. So I think it's okay as new students to be exploring and figuring out where the right fit is for you in terms of the things you want to be involved in. I will say, as time passes, to me, it's always about depth versus breadth. So being
Mm-hmm.
involved in a lot of things for 4 years sometimes it's harder to articulate or talk about when we think about a graduate school application or internship application, because you might be able to only talk about it superficially, not
Mm.
in a way that kind of has a little bit more depth to, because you haven't spent as much time with it. And this is if you think about your major, it kind of aligns that way as well. Your major is going to be a subject matter area that you can talk a lot about, because you're taking anywhere from 10 to 15 classes in a subject. And the idea is that you should be able to talk and kind of think critically about that subject matter. So the same thing applies to student organizations and being involved on campus. And how can you talk about and be involved in things and really make a difference in those spaces? So I think as first years, take a look at what's around you, get to know what the different organizations do, how well they're organized, or start your own organization, and create a project that you maybe want to do for yourself to fill a gap that might exist, or something that just really you feel inspired by. So I think trying a lot of things out is okay, but I think as time moves on, you have limited time. Your classes get harder. You might be working on campus. You might have other responsibilities. You're an RA or TA, whatever it might be. So how you choose your time becomes really much harder and becomes much more critical as you move through your academic career at U of R. So I think it becomes more about depth as time moves on. But right now, like your classes, you're taking a variety of things to kind of figure out what might resonate with you. But I know that in the interview process later, what your ability to talk and tell a story that has a little bit more depth to it does make a significant difference in the conversations you might have with an organization or with a graduate program.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I think that's a really good point that you made, because I was one who I was not involved with a lot of organizations on campus when I was back in school.
Sure.
But I could definitely see that if you were kind of in a bunch of different organizations, how that could be challenging later down the road when you are trying to articulate that in interviews. So I think that's a really good point. Thanks for bringing that up.
No problem. And I know students do that. I know, like,
Yeah.
I've worked with students that have been in like 5 things and they're like running on empty and like, and they're
Yeah.
doing it. And so I think some students can do that and they have a
Hmm.
really great way to balance that. But I don't think that's something that everyone has to aspire to. You might be involved in 1 or 2 things, but you might be very deeply involved in those organizations. I had an advisee that was EMT, and she worked on campus because she had to, as part of her being at U of R. And she was an EMT, and she spent a lot of time doing that. And those are the things she did: research, EMT, and she had a part-time job. That was her time.
Wow.
And she did those things really, really well and really, really
Yeah.
deeply. And she was able to talk about sort of the impact she had in each of those spaces as she, was graduating, going into, looking at graduate programs. So I think each student has to kind of evaluate on their own. I don't think there's a right or wrong, but being involved is the most critical thing. Being active and engaging with others and being part of the
Hmm.
different communities, that's the most important thing. So I think if the question is, do I do something or not do anything, I think I'm always going to decide on doing something and just finding the right rhythm and balance for yourself.
Sure. That reminds me of the article that you released, or well, I guess Central Communications released last week, which
Yeah.
was the 5 tips for students navigating a rocky job market. One of your tips was that relationships matter more than ever, and I think that's applicable even the scenario you were just saying.
Yeah, 100%. I think, the relationships have so many different pieces of value for students, I think, and just for people in general, right? I think it's can offer um, some comfort and socialization, right? I think it's
Yeah.
something that kind of helps us get through tough times of having relationships, people that are close to us, our friends, our family, and I think that's on a base level, I think, so important. I think from a career related perspective, there are people that can be sounding boards, that can provide advice, that really can serve as inspirations or cheerleaders for trying things out and doing different things. And I think on a more sort of tactical level, they can become people that really offer opportunities or connections to an internship
Mm-hmm.
or a job or a recommendation letter for graduate school. So the relationships take different forms and different people play different roles. And I'm sure, Danae, like, going through, your career so far, there's people that have played
Yeah.
different roles for you to help you navigate your
Mm-hmm.
career, and whether it's mentorship or someone that knew someone else that got you a job somewhere, or someone that helped you prep, or someone that just said you
Mm-hmm.
should totally go for that, you're totally qualified. So I think we're going to have a collection of people that play those roles in our lives, and when this kind of environment right now, those people become really critical, to our balance, to our senses, to our equilibrium, but also to navigating career questions, because those referrals, I think the risk factor goes up with organizations that are thinking about recruiting and hiring, and they want people they can trust. And I think that's where the relationship piece comes into play.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we have quite a bit of questions coming in, so I'm trying
Awesome.
to play a little bit of catch up.
Good stuff. No problem. We got time.
Okay, so we have one that is from a first year student
Okay.
who is pursuing international relations as a major with a possible double major in economics.
Awesome.
So this is pretty specific. So their question is, what type of internships or jobs do you see them possibly being able to pursue as a first year international relations major?
As a first year student. Okay, I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to speak in generalities,
Yeah,
but
go
I
for it.
think the important thing, um, the main takeaway, sit down with one of our advisors to kind of talk through your specific action plan that might, because obviously there's a bunch of stuff I don't know, right? Like where you're from, what are you doing, like kind of what things are interesting to you in that sort of broader scale of international relations and economics. So I'll speak broadly right now. So I think there's a variety of things that are going to be important or possible for you to do over the next few years. Um, as a first year student, there are certain opportunities that can be very challenging to get, because some organizations look to juniors or sometimes sophomores, or even seniors, for internship programs and kinds of experiences. So you have a lot of flexibility and opportunity as a first year student. Obviously, there's research you can do on campus, working with a faculty member in international relations or economics. There are many faculty members that would be open to taking on a first year student. It depends on your interests and what kind of research some of the faculty are doing that might allow you to gravitate towards certain folks. And I know that can be intimidating to like even approach a faculty member that you don't know really well to say, hey, I want to research with you and do research on what that
Mm-hmm.
looks like. So I think a great first step is talking to some of the research librarians. And so if you don't know already, at the university libraries, there's research librarians by subject matter. So you can actually talk to people that can help you do research, but also they know faculty and the different kinds of research that are going on at U of R. So there might be just really approachable, good first steps to like just learn, what does it mean to do research in international relations and economics? What does that look like? What tools do you use? And so the research librarians are a phenomenal resource to help navigate some of that. So if you go to university libraries, you can actually set up appointments, you can do research, you can under research, you can find people to actually connect with on those topics. But I think faculty research, I think, is really key, because to me, it lays a foundation for any work you might do, especially if you're going to go work at an NGO, working for a government agency, or even
Mm-hmm.
working in the private sector. Understanding how to do effective research and make an argument is going to be pretty critical to any field, honestly. But I think when we think about those fields of economics and international relations, extremely critical, right? And especially in the
Yeah.
global climate that we're in right now. So I think that's first and foremost an option that you can pursue. Depending on where you're from or what you do, the thing that's COVID has opened up for us is this virtual environment. And if you think you can do maybe a virtual research or project for an organization, what do you have to lose about pitching an idea to an organization that might be at the forefront of maybe creating international relations policy or focusing on economics? And this is where I'm talking broadly, because there's so many different specific areas. You might be looking at specific country relationships. You might be looking at certain issues like climate change, or trade agreements. And there's different NGOs and nonprofits or agencies that work in those very specific areas. So some organizations might be more open to doing virtual experiences than ever before, mostly because they've had to and they have to continue to do some of their work. And so I think there's never anything lost by pitching ideas or not an internship opportunity with an organization this summer. And it's something that we can help fund through the Greene Center.
Mm-hmm.
We have an internship fund that we provide students. And this past summer, we funded, I think, over 80 or 90 students that did
Mm-hmm.
virtual experiences. So you can actually get money still and do some of these experiences. So I think that's definitely a viable thing. And that's actually how I got one of my internships in graduate school. I reached out, I wanted to be in California. I wanted to work in a university. And I reached out to people that were running different units and offices at a lot of the California colleges and universities. And I found an alum from my university, Indiana University. And I created this internship from scratch with these people based on some of the interests that I had. So I think that's a very viable and very feasible thing to do. And obviously you can apply for more structured opportunities, but the likelihood of those is tougher depending on your background. Now, if you've been doing maybe economic research for 3 years in high school, and now you're kind of coming into that, you might be very well positioned to do that if you have connections or through your high school or maybe through U of R alumni, that's viable. But I think I would take it as a multi-pronged approach and think about different mechanisms and really kind of as an opportunity to explore and be curious about your interests
Mm-hmm.
and what the different vehicles for that are. So I'll stop there, but I think at the end of the day, it's talking to our advisors to kind of craft what the plan is best for you based on some of the interest areas you might have.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's definitely a really great place to start, especially as a first year. There's a lot of different opportunities out there. So just kind of slowly start to get your feet wet and you'll find your way forward from there.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, Joe, we do have a few more questions. Ooh, they're
Do
coming
this.
in.
It's good.
Okay, so this one touches upon a project that you're actually involved in. And before we get to the question, I was hoping you could maybe explain what this said project is before we get to the question, because some people might not be familiar with it. So I'd love if you could talk about the new NSF funded project exploring creative design at the human technology frontier through the emerging artist technologist occupation. It's a mouthful that
It
you are a
is.
part of.
Yeah. Sure. I think it's so it's an NSF grant,
Mm-hmm.
National Science Foundation grant, and so what it is NSF put out calls for universities, that are want to do research on what the future of work looks like in different sectors.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is really interesting. This is very much an interest area of mine is what's work going to look like in 5, 10, 20 years in different areas around the world, but also in different industry areas. And I think it's really fascinating because I think it's going to be so varied. And we're seeing a lot of that be accelerated over the last 8 months and how disruptive COVID has been to changing how industries work, right? Think about the restaurant and service industries, right? How people
Yeah.
in those areas pivoted. Like suddenly there's curbside pickup and there's delivery and all these things that a lot of restaurants never even thought that they would ever do. Suddenly they're doing them, right? And you can
Mm-hmm.
order online and Instacart, exploding and Amazon with, Whole Foods delivering food left and right. And so it accelerated and disrupted that sector significantly. And we don't know if it's ever going to go back to the way it was, prior. I do miss going to restaurants and actually like sitting at a bar and talking to people. But I know that, some people have really adjusted to that. And I think it's helped a lot of organizations survive. So that's just a really small example of that shift. But I think there's more disruption coming because of the rapid use of technology, machine learning, AI, but also data science and big data, as well as kind of a shift as an undercurrent in what's valued in the workplace, right? Understanding how to make decisions and synthesize information is becoming more and more critical, and the ability to adapt and be resilient is really at the forefront. So U of R being unique in how we kind of the programs we offer and what we do
Mm-hmm.
here. I think a group of people came together from the Warner School, from Eastman School of Music, to think about like, is this something that we want to kind of plant a flag in the ground around the future of work? And so we put together this application that really looked at this artist technologist. Where's the kind of what's the continuum of artistry and technology, and how is that shifting? What is the opportunity to change kind of how to create what performance looks like in the future,
Mm-hmm.
how to create art and music, how is technology impacting that, changing that. And so the planning grant that we applied for really kind of is the purpose of it is to take a deep dive on what that actually means and look like, and what could be the disruption that happens in that space for people that work in those industry sectors. And it's kind of a variety of industry sectors that might be impacted. And you can see, um, as an example, what's happened to the film industry over the last 6 months.
Yeah.
Movie theaters are closed. How are people releasing? The streaming wars continue, and Disney offering Mulan for
Mm-hmm.
$30, which I don't know if anybody paid for that, but but I think, but they've had to think about pivoting. Like, there's a lot of
Yeah.
money on the line. It's a massive industry. I think the music industry
Mm-hmm.
is massive as well. And so we have a great audio music engineering program here at U of R, and they were also involved in the grant to think about from a technology perspective. And so you have these great people and faculty members at the university and those three institutions coming together to think about, what does this look like, and what's the intersection of these things. And I think U of R is uniquely positioned to have that conversation around the artist technologist because of the programs we have here. So I'm pretty stoked to be part of that community that's involved in that. And I think it's something that I'm really fascinated to see how that progresses over the course
Mm-hmm.
of this year. And it might lead to a bigger grant applications depending on our findings and the conversations we have over the next few months.
Yeah, I think it's so fascinating, and I'm so excited to see what comes of this project. And I love that you're a part of it, because it's like directly related to us.
Yeah,
So normally we can learn all about it so much
absolutely.
quicker, which I love. And I have to say, I miss going to the movies so much. Like, I really, really do. You brought it up, so I had to just say
No,
that.
I'm with you on that. Like, that's one of my pastimes, was
It's just not the
going out to eat
same.
and going to see a movie. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
I know, I
Like,
know.
I've noticed that, like, they are releasing all these movies and things, like, on these streaming channels, but it just doesn't feel the same. Like, it's
Agreed.
almost not as exciting. I don't know, but I do appreciate that they're still moving forward. It's just a new normal that we'll have to
I
just
know.
start to get
We're,
used
we're,
to.
we're adjusting. We're
I
adjusting.
know, we're adjusting. All right, so back to the question related to this topic.
Okay.
So, the question submitted was, I'm curious, what are the projects centering around on the roadmap for the Greene Center? And how can I be involved?
Um, uh, Regarding to
Yes.
the grant itself,
Yes. Yep.
I think it's to be determined. I think part of it, part of one of the projects I'm working on that's sort of tangential to this, which I think is um, something I welcome people to help me out on, is essentially doing almost like a literature review of all the content that's out there around future of work. If there's so much being written about it right now, it's very much a topic that's front of mind for people working in workforce development, working in technology, working in the educational sector. So I think one of the things I really would love to get my hands on is trying to figure out how to write a literature review to get a better sense of what's trending and what's changing. Because I wrote something a couple of years ago, on the topic, but it's something that I know it's constantly moving. So I think that's something that I want to work on. So just email me if you want to be involved in that. So that I think is related to this topic, because I think that topic is also, we're going to take a deep dive into that artist technologist. And I think there's a wide spectrum of
Mm-hmm.
opportunities or positions or careers that might be related to that. So I think it's part of the project is researching, understanding what that is. So we'll be doing interviews with artist technologists, and we'll be like learning more about what that means, how people identify. And so that's part of the project, is kind of gathering more intel. It's a planning grant, meaning kind of setting the stage for a much larger grant potentially that we could apply for.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. So, like Joe said, if you want to learn more about it or really specifically get involved, I'll put his email in the chat so you can
Yeah,
just go on and have that conversation with him. Okay.
perfect.
So great. I love that there's interest. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
no, me too. I think that's something that
yeah, that's great.
I'm inspired by the topic, so I'm always love talking
Yeah,
about it. So,
definitely. Okay. So let me get back to this list of questions. All
all right.
right. So, There are some students who are not able to get shadowing and volunteer opportunities right now just due to the nature of COVID and just the impacts that it's had on certain industries. But
Yeah.
specifically, when we're thinking about like pre-health related students, this could be a subject that is really stressful to them and making them nervous that they can't get these opportunities right now. And there is some worry that it'll negatively impact them in the future. So do you have any like insight on that, on how to like maybe navigate where they are now and how they can maybe combat some of these anxieties around it, since we don't know what the future is going to hold, right?
Yeah. I think we're living in my lifetime. I think there's only one other health crisis I can think of that rival the scope and scale of what we're living through right now. And so I think from a healthcare perspective, students that are interested in healthcare, I know there's obviously a lot of them that go to U of R and are interested in that. I think while some opportunities have maybe been impacted negatively in terms of your ability to do them, I think there's so many different angles to tackle, so many issues that have been presented, and so many inequities that have been uncovered, or at least unearthed for for many people, where others it's
Sure.
always been very present and very very real. So I don't think anyone interested in healthcare can sit back and say, gosh, I wish there was something I can do or research or like learn more about or experience to help people out on healthcare. I think we're living through that, right? And I think at the university, obviously we have a research arm that's doing COVID research that is actively trying to solve these. We have a lot of community engaged organizations and classes that are being taught that are in the community trying to navigate and support this. There's research that are being done in public health sector that are kind of examining the issues that are being sort of exacerbated or shown because of what's happened over the last 6 to 8 months. There's student organizations I think that may be looking at, and I hope are looking at some of the
Hmm.
problems or the inequities that have been caused by some of this and trying to figure out how to help address those. So I think there's no shortage of it. And what it might require, and this is something that I wrote about in the article on the 5 tips, is how do you adapt what your interests were and what your background was to different or new opportunities? How do you
Hmm.
take what you thought you were going to do and pivot to something different that might be um, more relevant or current because of what's happening right now? That's, I think, the key thing there. So maybe you thought you were going to be doing research in a certain sector, but maybe because of what's happened, you want to look at the public health questions or issues or the technology behind deploying vaccines to millions, hundreds of millions of people globally. So I think it's created different opportunities, but at the same time, it's still healthcare in terms of the umbrella
Hmm.
that exists, and understanding that continues to position you well for going into the field because more and more medicine and healthcare, like many other fields, are interdisciplinary. You can't just go and be a doctor without thinking about the public health aspects, the
Hmm.
technology that goes into the business of healthcare, the insurance around healthcare. Like you have to be well versed and well rounded to be able to understand and solve those challenges for your patients. So I think when we think about the application process for graduate school, they want you to be able to articulate that. They want you to be able to say, I looked at these issues and these problems, and my patients are going to be facing all of these things. And it doesn't take long for you to find people that were uninsured getting COVID tests or being hospitalized, how much it cost them, and what the long-term debilitating effects of that might be for their not only their health, but their financial state, their job status, and countless other parts of their lives. So for me, it's always interconnected, and especially around healthcare. Many people would argue that all of these pieces, your stability and financial security, your safety mentally and physically, are related to your preventative health as well as your long-term health and life expectancy even. So I feel like with healthcare in particular, there's a variety of opportunities. The question is, where do you kind of see yourself, and where do you pivot some of your interests, or some of your things that are important to you to address or help to address some of the things that have presented themselves over the last 6 to 8 months. I think there's still opportunity, and how you talk about that in graduate applications or med school applications is going to be important, because I think there's no shortage of issues that have been created.
Yeah, that's great, Joe. And for anyone listening, if you want to continue to work through some of this, I highly encourage you reach out to our office, schedule an appointment with an advisor. They can definitely look at your specific situation and really help you through that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Agreed.
those are great tips, Joe. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Of course, of course. So we have about 8 minutes left. So I'd like to do like a last call for questions. We do have quite a bit still. I'm not sure that we'll get to all of them.
Okay.
But with the last few minutes, a question came through about the Virtual Career Expo, since we had mentioned that earlier. And they're wondering how it will be different than a face-to-face experience.
I'm actually really excited about the technology offered through our partner Handshake. I think they really try to create an experience for students and employers where you can have some one-on-one conversation discussion. If I'm being honest, I think the old career fair in-person model wasn't always sort of the most effective. It was hard to navigate sometimes. It really kind of played to people's nerves. It was, especially for certain organizations that had long lines, wasn't always conducive or helpful. I think this is an opportunity for students to pre-schedule a lot of things, have 10 minutes of one-on-one FaceTime with an employer and a recruiter, and also have opportunities to kind of listen in and sort of hear more in more of like an info session kind of style format. I think technology is going to help, because there's going to be opportunities to have one-on-one interaction and to plan ahead for that, and to do a little research in ways that maybe didn't exist before. Do you lose some of the serendipity of conversations and roaming around? Yeah, sure. I think that's going to be something that's impacted. But I think it still allows for students to maybe make connections, which I think at the end of the day, those kinds of events and other ones we'll do throughout the fall are about facilitating connections between people in the hopes of it leading to jobs or opportunities or information or access to something. So I think what we have in the expo specifically, and what Handshake is providing to us, I think helps us do that. That being said, definitely want feedback from students. This is definitely, we're living prototypes for some of these things. And so I think if those things aren't accomplished, we want to know about it. We want to provide that to Handshake. We want to have those conversations and explore other alternative options if they're not fulfilling the things that we want to do.
Yeah, I'm so excited too, because like you were saying, the opportunities have just grown tremendously for students who may have like been overwhelmed with the old expo style. Like now, Joe had mentioned, like you can schedule a one-on-one meeting with an employer ahead of time, which gives you that time to like hype yourself up. You can make some notes beforehand, and you're not necessarily standing in a line with 20 students in front of you. And like, you know how those things go. Sometimes one student will like hog the recruiter for like so long, and then you're just kind of, you get annoyed, and then you're off your game. And so this definitely, it's going to be an interesting take on the Career Expo. And I will say that as part of my role for marketing, if you have not registered, I highly recommend that you do that ASAP. You will need to register for the expo this year. It's not the same as being in the Feldman Ballroom and just walking by and dropping in. So there is some pre-planning that needs to be done on the students' end, but it's going to be such a really unique experience. And I think Handshake so far has done a really great job. There's a bunch of online resources that can help you prepare. I'm actually going to put something in the chat if I can find it. Where did it go? I think I might have lost it, but Handshake has a lot of really great resources, and we have them linked on our homepage of our website. So you can check them out there. And there's just some tips and tricks on how to really step up your game and be prepared for it.
Yes. Were you one of those students that hogged the recruiter's time?
Oh, no. I was too shy when I was in like college to do that sort of thing. So I didn't even go to
I
my
figured as
expo.
much. Yeah, I figured as much. I didn't think that. It was a more rhetorical question.
Yeah, no, I definitely did not do those things, but I mean, to each their own. I'm also in a
Yeah,
different industry, so it looks a little bit different sometimes.
true.
Um, but we have about 3 minutes left, so this is where I just want to take a moment to thank everyone for joining us today. It's been a lot of fun. And Joe, like, if you have any last words before our session ends, I hand over the mic to you.
No, I think we covered a lot of ground today
Yeah.
and a lot of diverse of topics. Um, so I think the number one thing for me always is just ask questions,
Hmm.
seek people out. So people on our team, other people in your network, alumni. I think it's gonna be really important to lean on people and relationships in this time, and really kind of find community. So we're here as an office to support that. And if there's things we can do better to really kind of continue to help students and meet them where they're at, we're definitely down for that.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. And Joe, thank you for lending us your brain for a couple minutes and like
And no problem.
sharing so many great insights and advice.
Good to hang with you, Dee, and looking forward
Yeah.
to our October session as well.
Yeah. We'll see you all then. Thanks for joining us. Have a nice Wednesday.
Take care.
All right. Bye.
Bye.